Afternoon, David.
Afternoon, David.
How's things today?
Aye, kind of warm. Having a look at the thermometer there, it's up at 29 degrees centigrade. So we're all a bit warm, hot under the gills.
I have got the fan going here. You've got the fan going there.
Aye,
Let's see.
yeah.
It is warm. It says 25 here. Clear blue skies. Very, very warm. Even walking the dog takes a bit of energy out of you. You know what I mean? So,
It takes a bit of energy out of me just sitting here.
anyway, your numbers are starting to climb. We've got 17, 18 people watching. Good afternoon, Kirsty.
Oh, yeah. Kirsty Falls on YouTube. Right, fine. Afternoon, Kirsty.
So anyway, folks, as you join us, the topics of conversation today will be the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court submission from the UK government. It was lodged on Wednesday, and then we'll talk a wee bit about the energy crisis, and then we'll get guided by you guys. We'll see what's happening in the comments. Good afternoon, Margaret.
Hi, Margaret.
So we'll see how it goes for there. We just get a notification in that we're live on YouTube. And I know we're live on Facebook. Good afternoon, Robert. Stuart. Anyway, as I say, well, let's get started. The Supreme Court submission by the UK government. What did you make it?
Basically, what it's doing is, yet again, it's just another case. I'm going, no, you can't. When we know, yes, we can.
Yes. Now, folks, you've got to understand this. I'm trying to say that they were saying that the Constitution was reserved, but that's been ripped to bits. So now they are saying, what they're saying is, because the English Constitution is no standing in Scots law, we know that for a fact, because it's been ruled in the Court of Sessions that the Magna Carta has no place in Scots law. So therefore, the UK Constitution, the English Constitution, was made up by English common law and gentlemen's agreements. Then it has no bearing in Scots law. So they've moved from the Constitution being reserved. What they're saying now is that the Treaty of Union is reserved to Westminster, and it can only be dissolved by Westminster. So whether that's right or no, because I'd much rather, but it can't be right because it's a people of Scotland choice.
Yeah, you can't have a situation where there are two parties to a treaty, and then one party takes all the rights of that treaty and says that the other one cannot leave, doesn't have the power to leave. That's impossible. Politically, that's impossible. But as a matter of moral and ethical judgment, that's impossible. And in actual fact, any country that's ever formed a treaty with any other country would say the same. That you cannot have two parties to a treaty where one is held against its will.
Right, but the other side here is, if it can only be sorted in Westminster, then the answer is going to have to be a plebiscite election to Westminster.
Okay.
And that would then have us do the Thatcher and send the majority of MPs down that road. Doesn't matter whether the majority of the vote is over 50% or not. That's a lot of bollocks. We're talking about a first past the post race.
Yeah.
Right? Majority of MPs down that road. Let's say we get 52, 54 of the 59 MPs. That's an overwhelming majority. It cannot be disputed. And we've already surpassed that once before. So they called the Scottish Grand Committee, suspend the Union, come up the road, Constitutional Convention of all elected public officials. It's called bringing together the three estates. And as we have the majority of councillors, the majority of MSPs and the majority of MPs, they vote to dissolve the Union. And then they go down and dissolve the Union because of all the people who already been served by sending the MPs there in the first place. Now, the international community will accept that. Obviously, we would like to see it as a plebiscite Scottish election, because then the Europeans will get a say, the 16 and 17-year-olds get a say. The majority would be much larger. And I think it holds more legitimacy, because only the people in Scotland would have had a say.
Yes.
You know, so it doesn't matter what this Supreme Court thing says. The other thing that the UK government are trying to claim is that the Supreme Court doesn't have the legislative competence to look at the case, right? UK government Supreme Court does not have power to rule on legitimacy of Indy Ref 2. And the other thing it goes on to say, and believe it or not, this is the Advocate General for Scotland, which is the UK policeman in the Scottish legal system. All right. Now, what he's saying is that even if we do vote for independence, it would have no legitimacy, because only Westminster could deal with it, and a referendum, that is. And he also, what he's saying is, but it would have political legitimacy. So therefore, you can't have the Supreme Court must rule that Scotland can't have a referendum, because it would affect the UK state, basically.
Yeah, so you can't have a referendum because you're going to vote yes.
And what it said it could allow UK law officers to make preemptive references to any Scotland's legislative proposals deemed to be out with legislative competency. But they already have that. We've seen that they've imposed laws like the Internal Market Bill without legislative consent motions from the Scottish and Welsh governments.
Yeah.
Which is how it's supposed to work. It's the Sewell Convention, I believe we call it, isn't it?
Yeah, the Sewell Convention ended, or came to an abrupt end on the last time that the Supreme Court made a judgment of that type, if you remember.
Yes, it was the United Nations Charter on Rights of Children. We wanted to put it into Scots law. And what they said was the Supreme Court made up some bogus findings that said, no, it's outside the legislative consent of the Scottish Parliament, because it would mean the UK government would have to think of Scottish children when writing laws. Surely they should have been thinking about Scottish, English, Welsh and Northern Irish children when writing laws anyway. So the actual finding of the court was bogus.
Yeah. But we know, is that not what's going to happen this time? This time, what they'll do is they'll find a form of words which is absolutely bogus, but gets them out of a hole.
Yes.
You know, and because they live largely that end of the country, or that end of the UK, it's like they're going to support the UK government, for goodness sake. They're going to come out with the Scottish government doesn't have the competency, and therefore we can consider ourselves well and truly, in the eyes of the UK government, a colony. And being a colony, that's an entirely different ball game as far as the United Nations is concerned.
Yes, and I will have to agree with you there, David. The last thing Westminster wants is a ruling that's going to say, no, Scotland can't have a say. That's why we've got all these Tory MPs saying, of course there's a way out for Scotland, but then won't tell us what the way out is.
Exactly.
You know,
I've heard that load.
The goalpost on this one, what they're saying is only the treaty can only be dissolved in Westminster where there's majority English MPs. Basically, what they're trying to say is it would need to be a vote by all MPs in Westminster to dissolve it. Not Disney. The treaty only concerns Scotland and England, and there is the Scottish and English Grand Committee. That's how evil worked.
Yeah.
Evil worked as the English Parliament sitting as the English Grand Committee. The Scottish Grand Committee is still there. We know Robin Cook used it in the 89 to reaffirm the claim of right, where they sat as the Scottish Parliament and passed the claim of right into Scots law again.
Yep, and the claim of right
at Westminster.
The claim of right was yet again ratified by the Westminster Parliament. I think it was 2017 during the
2018 was during the World Cup in Russia.
Yeah,
2018. But you know, they're no likely respect any of that stuff.
Oh, aye, yeah, but it's this is, you know, at the moment what we're doing is we're making it a judicial problem, right? This is a political problem.
Yes, and I think that'll be the ruling of the Supreme Court. I think they'll sit on the fence and say, you know what, this is a political issue. We're not ruling on this at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I've got to say,
thank you, class action. Apparently, UN Resolution 1514 will be evoked. If you want to if you want to expand on that, please do, class action. Wait a minute, put that last comment in. We'll put class action's comment up. And if he would like to expand on that, but it does change the rules of the game. It would be the UK officially saying that Scotland was trapped as a colony, basically.
And I think what the Scottish government have done are quite clever is in terms of a tick box exercise, which they've got to complete that tick box. They've got to ask for a Section 30, then ask the question of the Supreme Court, are we competent, and go down and go down and go down until eventually we get to where all the avenues are closed, and then the actual route is clear. It's that way we go. It's a plebiscite, or we do run a referendum ourselves, regardless of what the UK government say. So it's going to happen. The October referendum is going to happen. If it, for some reason, some unusual reason, it doesn't happen, it will be a plebiscite.
Yep.
And
as I say, I would rather it was a Scottish election. You know, yeah. I would rather it be a true reflection of the opinion of people of Scotland. But if the only place where the union can be dissolved is in the Westminster Parliament, then it only refers to Scotland or England. The majority of, Thatcher said it herself, majority of pro-independent Scottish MPs. So the route is there.
Right, I think we've discussed that to death. Right, we'll get on with the next point, which I believe was the energy issue. Yes?
Aye. I think we were going to do a suspect record of ministers and lords.
Oh yeah, I must start. I thought that was
the UK government isn't taking any action on energy.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent the day doing various bits of research. I spoke to Davey this morning about trying to find out about MPs' shareholdings in energy. Oh, sorry, what's this we're putting up? Resolution 15 is the declaration of granting independence to colonial countries and people. All right, okay. Well, look that up. Yeah. But David suggested I go into the interests of MPs, where they have to declare what they've got, and what they've done, what they've been given, and all that sort of thing. And to be honest with you, in terms of shareholding, it was a nonsense. It didn't tell you what you need to do, because the rule is that they don't have to declare a shareholding that's under 15%. So let's just consider Shell. If I had a 0.5% shareholding in Shell, I'd be probably the richest man in Scotland, right? So that's how. And if I was an MP, I wouldn't have to declare that because it's less than 15%. Simple as that, right? So I did get out a load of other information. Like I started looking at Nadine Zahawi and his past and all the rest of it. Oh my goodness me. David's got a good few things to say on that, but he actually worked for Gulf Keystone Petroleum. Look it up. Now, before he left, he was on £30,000 a month. That's how much he was being paid, and he received a £330,000 bonus, which means that if he wasn't declared on the list of directors and major shareholders, he would at least be considered as a non-executive director, giving consultancy to that firm. Now, he left them, but in a situation like that, always it's usual for a company like that to give shares to the non-executive director if they're going in as a member of parliament or some good reason why they cannot continue, right? And Zahawi actually has, through his family, a family trust. And the family trust is called Balshore Investments. And that is registered in a solicitor's office in Gibraltar. And so effectively, what he's done is he's still got the shares, but it looks as if they're somewhere else, right? As is usually the case, they hide them behind a tax haven. Yeah. So it's when David said on Indie Truck David this morning, what we've got is we've got a syndicate, a criminal syndicate running the country. He's quite bloody right. And this competition between Sunak and Truss is just another godfather. Sorry, David.
When you dig a wee bit deeper into Zahawi, you'll find out that he was under investigation by the Treasury. Where is he now? Yeah. He's the Chancellor of the Exchequer in charge of the Treasury.
Correct. And you couldn't make it up. You get it seriously. If it came out as a book, you go, that's trash, that's rubbish.
Then, of course, we have to look at Javid and Sunak's part in ANG Hanbro and the downfall of the Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Scotland, and the banking crisis altogether.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about the Register of Interest is, for most of for a lot of the MPs, you're getting to see who's backhanding them. You get to see who owns them. Like we were talking about wee Govey.
Yeah.
And the personal donations which have been declared on the Register of Interest. You said they come to over £100,000.
Yeah, it's, the actual figure is 158,205. Although 100,000 of that, given as two £50,000 donations,
which is a maximum.
By Mr. Gettler, who is a property tycoon in London, who was in Germany. And you would say to yourself, why is a property tycoon given that kind of gift to Michael Gove? Well, David can explain that really well, right? Go on, David.
What, explaining gifts?
Explain that particular gift from a property tycoon.
Well, it depends. The planning law is to make it easier for these buggers to build wherever they want.
Yep, and also, what about the education side?
Oh, the transfer of the school estates into these bloody trusts.
Yes.
I don't know if you're aware of this, folks, but down that road, when a school fails inspection by the education department, it's forced out of council hands and into these new quangos that they're supposed to be not for profit, but they will become for profit. But what happens at the same time is the state-owned or the community-owned school, its deed is then given to this trust. So there's a huge transfer of assets out of public hands and into the hands of these quangos, which will eventually become private companies the same way they are in America, when you get companies running state schools, bidding to take our county schools and things like that. So what you've got down that road is a huge transfer of public assets into these, what they're calling them non-for-profit now, quangos. But as I say, they'll be for profit, and it'll also lower the amount of money going into schools because the board will be wanting paid. Eventually, of course, they will borrow against that title deed to improve the school, but that just means, to do whatever they're going to do with it, you know.
Yeah.
But it was a massive transfer out council hands and into the hands of these bloody trusts doing that road.
Okay, just dragging it back a bit to Zahawi. Zahawi was one of the two people who set up YouGov, the polling company. You probably heard of it, right? And when he became an MP, obviously he couldn't carry on as that, right? And yet again, what's happened is that his shares in that he has supposedly given away have gone to the Balshore Investment Company, which is a trust of the Zahawi family. Yet again, back to Gibraltar, registered in a solicitor's practice in Gibraltar. So therefore, the man actually has a major shareholding in YouGov through his family that he doesn't have to declare personally. And I've looked; it's not on the declared interests on under his name. He's got all the.
It's in a family trust holding in a different country, so he doesn't have to declare it on the members' register. You know, but I mean, let's look at Moggy, for example. Since the Brexit vote, his company, Somerset Asset Management, has made profits of 109 million. The same guy who was shoving Brexit to the people in England moved his company from the UK to Dublin so he can keep trading in the European Union. It has equivalence to trade in the European Union, and it's ultimately registered in the Cayman Islands. So any of these people are paying any tax towards schools, hospitals, anything. But you can bet your boots that they're using them. Well, maybe not the school system because they'll put their kids through private schools. You know.
Yeah.
So
it's you could wring your hands and shake your head and all the rest of it and go, it's too much. It's just too corrupt, right? Don't forget, we have an escape route. We can get rid of that lot. We can laugh at them from the north side of a 17-foot high border fence after we're done, because we'll need a fence. We will need border checks and all the rest of it. If people are sitting here thinking, oh, there's going to be a common travel area and the M74 is still going to whiz up and down as it is, it's not. People will go through like that, but it'll be cars. It'll be where they are known, and they'll be pulled over every sort of 10th or 15th trip or something like that, right? There will be a border between Scotland and England because we will want to get into the EU, and we will have to do checks on goods. Yeah.
Hey, now Stephen Kelly brought up a point there. All quiet over the Russian report. Of course it is. David and I spoke about this before. Do you know that the Tories, who own most of the shipping companies, guys in the Lords and things like that, who own the shipping companies and shares in the shipping companies, they're taking Russian oil for Russian tankers off the Suffolk coast and selling it on the international market. You can bet your boots they're buying it off Putin on the cheap. But you've got to remember, the Tory party have got a huge amount of money out of Russia.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson and his carry on with meeting Lebdev without security staff with him. You know, it's all a wee bit suspect. We now have a KGB oligarch son in the House of Lords.
Yep.
Wow. Mental.
Yep. The other thing that I saw in this morning, unfortunately, I missed the guy's name that was being interviewed on Sky News. He was one of the head blokes out of one of the energy companies, and what he was saying was that at the moment gas is being pumped out of the seabed in Scotland, and what's happening is that the UK government have allowed the situation where the power stations that are buying the gas to produce electricity are paying the full international rate. And what he said, and this is the first time I heard that on broadcast news, was that should be stopped, and the UK should have a preferential price for gas, and also the gas should come to the UK first before being sold onto the international market, because, as he said, from a UK point of view, it's our gas.
Yep. Now, what you've got to remember is, David, you and I have spoken about this. The UK government are the licence issuers.
Yep.
When we take back control, we're going to have to issue new licenses. And when we take back control, we'll write it into the licenses that we get it first, and we get it at the rate we want to pay it for it.
Yep.
Otherwise, you don't get to draw any more out and sell it in the international market at all. But when we talk about natural resources, we know about the Combo site being opened up, and there's another one just about to open up and all called Gross Bank, which can pump 70,000 barrels a day.
Yeah.
You know, so much for it running out, folks. It would appear it's running into the UK coffers.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of the big lie, was it's running out. Sir, what's his face? I forget his name now. During the 2014 run up, he was on the TV telling us that there's only 15 billion barrels of oil left, and that's it, guys. It's all over. My experience and knowledge of the oil industry says that that's it.
So Ian Wood, Tory lying.
That's
man
right.
should be put up in the courts in Scotland for misleading the people of Scotland.
Yeah, he wasn't Sir Ian Wood at that time. He was just Ian Wood, right?
Well, it doesn't matter what his title is now or what it was then.
He
misled the people of Scotland.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, David, let me finish. What I'm saying is that because he did that little favour for the UK Tory government, or Tory lived in government at the time, he ended up getting a knighthood.
I know.
So,
as I say, but the man's on record misleading the people of Scotland.
Yeah.
There's nothing. He should be dragged into the courts.
Mm-hmm.
He willfully misled the people of Scotland. Well, of course, he's a private citizen.
Yeah.
He wasn't a legislator at the time. He couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
He was the go-to expert for the BBC, and he was a policeman. Yeah. We know that now.
Yeah.
As far as I know, Stephen, Poland's still 50-50. The 58% poll was 2 years ago, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But once again, of course, Sir John Curtis is the guy that keeps pulling out to talk about the commercial polls. The polling that people want to see is the UK government polls. But they're doing their very best to suppress that information, even though they've been told by the Information Commissioner to hand it up.
Yeah.
Because they use public money to do the polling, so it belongs to the people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just talk about polling on Scottish independence, there's polling on Welsh independence, there's polling on English independence, there's polling on reunification of Ireland or Northern Irish becoming an independent state itself. Yeah. Remember, Northern Ireland have many options. People don't ever talk about Northern Ireland. You know, it's the forgotten province. But Northern Ireland have got three options as far as I can tell. Reunification. They can have a devolution for Dublin. They could become a new state. So they could. You know, so the options for Northern Ireland are well open.
Stephen's saying, can we freeze all London assets after independence and claim back all our wealth stolen? Well,
that's a matter of negotiation.
Yeah, that's right.
It'll be a matter of negotiation. Say, but we spoke about that. Richard Murphy covered it pretty well. Talking about but I seen a comment up there saying that was climate change out the window. I have to agree with that. The Tories are no interested in climate change. They ever opened up 2 new oil fields, and Liz Truss wants to ban farmers down that road for using solar power.
Yeah.
And we've just talked about who's got shares in these bloody companies. You know.
Yeah.
So, you know, but I say the Northern Irish, they've got more than one option open to them. Nobody's explaining that to them right enough. You know what I mean?
That's every 7 years a generation in the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah.
It's the time it takes a child to get through school to 18-year-old when they can vote.
Yeah.
It's called a political generation.
Yeah.
It's defined in the Good Friday Agreement and should apply to all parts of the UK.
Yes.
Because the UK government's a signatory to it, and as we're all members of the UK Parliament, that makes Scotland, Wales, and England signatories to it.
However, the reason we're discussing the word generation is because the unionists keep on bringing it up, but it was a once in a generation vote, and that was as was described the other day on TV very, very succinctly, was by the guy that actually helped write the Edinburgh Agreement, that it's as much of a political statement as we can bring back the 350 million that we give to the EU, written on the side of a red bus. Yeah.
Just a lot of lies. What
Yeah.
What else have we got to talk about? So, the energy crisis, of course, where we're at with that. Martin Lewis, of course, is screaming at the UK government to get on with it. Boris Johnson saying nothing, there's a new leader. You know, it's nuts.
Ginger's Giraffe says the once in a generation thing didn't take into consideration the major change of Brexit. Quite absolutely right.
And that's what the Liberals doing that road are saying, and the UK media.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the Liberals doing there are saying. Hold on, there's been a change of circumstance. Scotland's a nation. It's their choice.
Yeah.
And they talk about how Westminster is no right to deny the people of Scotland a choice. You know, the Liberals doing there. And it's starting to pick up a wee bit in the Liberal society doing that road, because they can see themselves being suppressed in the same way with the draconian laws going through doing that Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Public Order Act and the Police Crimes Courts of Sentencing Bill, we spoke about it before, will basically make public protest doing that road illegal.
I just wish they would stop wearing socks with sandals. It's a bad look, guys. It's a bad look.
Now, let's talk a wee bit about the water companies doing that road, shall we? It would appear that they're running out of water, and that's leading to screams of a water UK-wide water grid, so that they can take the water from Scotland to sell it to the people of England.
Yes.
You know.
Okay, there is a rumour that there already is a large.
I worked on it.
Yeah. Shh. You're not supposed to say that. All right. Okay.
Okay.
There's a rumour, and we'll keep it like that. Rumour that there is a large pipeline that's big enough to drive a tranny van down that connects Scotland's water network to England's water network and then into Kielder Dam, etc. Right? There's no official recognition that that's in place. However, certain people that I'm not going to name were actually working on the damn thing. All right.
Right, listen, here's one for Stephen. Don't know why we didn't make the internal market bill illegal under Scots law. Well, why? Quite simply, we did try. We did say that you don't get consent for this law, but they ignored us anyway. And I was reading in the Supreme Court thing about UK law officers. Who the fuck are UK law officers?
Exactly.
What's this UK law they keep talking about?
Yeah, there's no such thing.
As far as I'm aware, Scotland and England have different legal systems. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in the Joanne Cherry prorogation of Parliament case, they are of equal worth within the UK Union.
Yeah. Okay, that means at some point you could have an English court saying no, and a Scottish court saying yeah. Who's got the casting vote on that? There is none. It has to be.
The court has a casting vote on it.
Yeah,
that's why the nonsense going to the UK Parliament at the moment about whether Scotland has a legislative consent, have the legislative authority to run a referendum. The Supreme Court will probably sit the fence on that one. It's easy. The easiest thing for them today is to say it's political and walk away.
That's what they would judge to be the ultimate court in the land, which is Westminster.
That's why I said and I explained that's why it needs to be a majority of Scots MPs to get down that road and dissolve the union. Yeah. It would be much better if but that's the UK's case right now, is that only Westminster can dissolve the union. But that doesn't mean the whole of Westminster. If the people for Scotland vote for it under the way things are, Margaret Thatcher made it clear, send the majority of MPs are pro-independence.
Mm-hmm.
the union's over. You're right, Joe. There was never any once in a generation and any agreement. But never mind the agreements. Politicians make these mad mental politicians make these mad mental statements. Boris Johnson, much rather die in a ditch. Time scale past was they died in a ditch. No. So absolutely, this nonsense and rhetoric by politicians has no bearing on the will of the people. And that was something else I was talking about this morning, and I meant it about the will of the people and Miss Sturgeon being demonised in the press at Sturgeon's referendum, SNP's obsession with referendum. It was the vote and the will of the Scottish people. As I have to explain to idiots all the time, especially idiots that don't read manifestos. The way we elect political parties allegedly is they produce a manifesto, the populace reads the manifestos and decides who they want to govern. In Scotland's case, it was the SNP and the Greens who both had the manifesto pledged to a referendum. That's democracy. But apparently our democracy couldn't. So we're going to have to deal with their democracy. That's the UK government submission to the Supreme Court. And then they'll try and rig that. So when we send 56 MPs down that road, they'll say you only get 49% of the vote. You're not having it. But that's no in their power. Once we, the people, give our sovereignty to the 56 MPs, that's a majority of Scottish MPs. That's enough to call the Scottish Grand Committee and dissolve the bloody union. But what else we got? Westminster trying to save money by killing off more pensioners, genocide again. You're absolutely right, Rev of Wrestling, Tim Campbell.
Yeah, John's popped up again. The wrong person is Chancellor. It should be David Davies.
John doesn't seem to get it. We don't really care.
Yeah.
I mean, he's also put up comments saying he supports Liz Truss. I don't give a damn. We don't vote Tory in Scotland. And the fact that a bus driver down there supports Tories says everything that's wrong with England and their education system. I mean, the reason why UK ministers keep banging on about Scottish education crap is because England's education's crap. Proof of England's education being crap is the stupidness of the Brexit vote. In a market economy, you take yourself out of a market of 400 million people is the description of gross stupidity. I'm sorry. In a market economy, and that's what the UK is, to take away trade deals with 27 countries and most of the rest of the world through the European Union is absolute economic stupidity. The people in England did it. Now, up here in Scotland, their kids are a wee bit slow off the mark, but by the time they get to the TAPI, our secondary education system, 78.9% of them this year passed with A to C grades in their hires, their national fives and advanced hires. That's excellent. We have more university graduates per population, per capita population than any other European Union country. Eurostat information released on July 21st, 2022. Scotland has the highest educated population in Europe. That's a bloody embarrassment to the English government. That's why they keep talking about Scottish education being crap. They will get John on here proving how poor the education system down that road is. We've got a working class bus driver voting Tory, basically voting against his own interests. Mental.
It's not unusual. I lived in England for 18 years, John.
I know.
A lot of my neighbours were Tories. And
well,
they were good, normal, ordinary working people, you would call them working class people, right? And they voted Tory. And down that road, you had the duopoly. You had either Labour or you had Tories. And all they do is just swap positions every now and then. That's it.
That's right. Labour don't tend to reverse policies that have been put in place for Tory and tinker around the edges of them. Hold on, hang on. We'll get to that one in a minute. What was this one? A good example of England's education being poor. I'm not going to use that. Is when someone in England asks you, how can you be Scottish if you don't come from Glasgow? That happened to me when I lived in London. Brilliant. Let's have a look at this one. The economic arguments against Brexit make sense, but it undermines the argument for Scottish independence. Scotland's economy is far more reliant on RUK. After you never heard so much passion all your life, you've got to flip that argument on its head. And the argument is that apparently we ship 60% of your goods to England. You've got to flip that on its head. That means England needs 60% of the surplus Scotland produces. And if they don't want it post independence, we'll just send it to Europe. What's happening in Europe right now is the cost of living's going up a wee bit and inflation's a hell of a lot lower what it is here. The reason for it is the surplus in Europe, because there's no exporting to the UK, is going into the European market, and the flood of these goods into the European market means cost of living's coming down. So their inflation isn't as rampant. Wow, talk about economic literacy. You know what I mean? So,
and if anybody was to argue that, you're going to spend years trying to get into the European Union, don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it. What we'll do is we'll join after. Same as Norway and Iceland are in, all the rest of it, right?
Then we'll trade with England because they'll still need the goods. We'll trade with them the same way Northern Ireland is.
Yeah.
We don't even have to look for a trade agreement. There's one already in place.
That's right.
There you go. But as I say, proof that there is something no right down that road is when they're in a market economy and they couldn't work out that leaving the market of 450 million people, the biggest common market on the planet, was stupid. That's a failing of the education system. That's a failing of government. That's a failing of the information sector down that road, which tells you it's all bloody corrupt.
Yeah.
But when you can hoodwink 51% of the English or 51% of the UK population who has a market economy, that leaving a market of 450 million customers is a good idea, it tells you there's something no right with the education system. When people are no bright enough to work out that what they're doing is stupid. You know.
John, I'll answer that one that John's put up. You know, if Scotland never comes in, many English people will be upset, and the majority of the English do not support Scottish independence. Well, why would they? Is my first question. But as far as
we've covered this one. We covered this one. The latest poll on English independence down that road by YouGov said that 49% of people in England want to leave the Union. So we can say that things are busted flush anyway.
Yeah.
But I have very little interest.
I imagine the English people are going to be maybe angry with the UK government, because the UK government have gaslighted the people of England for so long, making them think that Scotland is subsidised by England, which is patently not true, and now proven. And I could even take you to the Hansard documents of transcripts of speeches in the House of Commons, where that has been outlined quite clearly that Scotland is not subsidised by England, John. So I would say I would be aware that the people of England are not going to be very happy, but I would imagine also part of their anger is going to be directed towards Westminster.
A lot is going to be directed towards Westminster, but the social contract between the Scottish and English people is strong. That'll no change.
That's right.
The banter will still be there. They'll still be calling us spongers and jobs. They'll still be banging on about 2 world wars they didn't win. And a game of football they did win.
Yeah, you'll still be able to drive up the road and come and have a pint with us, and we'll slap you across the back and say, "Don't be such a stupid bugger," and we'll go have a good laugh about it. All right.
There's a bit of exceptionalism, you know. I mean, the way John's talking about the Scottish people is as if they're fucking property.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Lorraine's put it right. Okay, and we've devoted too much time to this stupidness again. We don't care if English people want to keep us. Keep us. You're not keeping us. It's our shout. You know, and by the way, apparently you can keep your Union Jack as well, John, as part of. We don't want it as part of the divorce settlement. But we've devoted too much time. Right, we're 45 minutes is up again, David.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button. We'll probably be back on Sunday for an Atari, so what do you think?
Indie 2 Cafe. Come on.
Oh, the Indie 2 Cafe a charity night. Do beg your pardon. It's 24th of September. General Motors Club in Holywood Town in North Lanarkshire. If you're in West Lothian, in North Lanarkshire, South Lanarkshire, Glasgow, and you can get to the place easy and back out and on public transport, then please come along. Ticket prices are tenner, and it includes raffles, buffet, and entertainment and good company. All right.
I'm going.
So there's a good company for a start. Because I'm a grumpy old git. I see somebody put up wondering who's Jack and Victor. Well, I'll be the grumpy one.
Excuse me, are these yours?
So as I say, fine. If you're on YouTube and you like what we talk about, and it is straight talking, and we like interacting with you guys, hit like and subscribe. We do a show every Thursday, 4 o'clock, and we have impromptu shows as well. We did one on Sunday last week. Depending on what push comes up over the next few days, we might do another one on Sunday. We'll call it the Sunday Chinwag. So thanks very much for joining us today, folks. Enjoyed the interaction. David.
Bye, Davey.
Bye, Davey.